Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the City of Waterloo Council meeting in open session, Monday, August 28th, now at 3:30 p.m. We have a moment of reflection. At the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. Then I have a statement here just on some of the things that have been going on lately south of the border. Like most Canadians, I was horrified and outraged by the recent racist, hate-filled events that occurred in the city of Charlottesville, fueled by bigotry that saw an innocent life taken, while others were injured, standing up for justice, equality, and fairness. It's important that we all speak up and condemn hate groups, such as white supremacists, as they move our society backwards. I'm proud to live in a country and city that values and celebrates diversity. We must acknowledge that we are not perfect and have our own issues to address as a community. Every day, in words and deeds, we must each demonstrate our commitment and appreciation for inclusivity. Embracing diversity makes us stronger. Hate and bigotry have no place in our community. It will not be tolerated. As stated in our respectful behavior policy, we are committed to promoting a safe, healthy, respectful, and positive environment for everyone, regardless of differences in race, ethnicity, religion, gender expression, gender identity, or sexual orientation. We stand strong and united against all those that would divide and harm others. So thank you for giving me that moment there. First up on our council agenda is approval of minutes. Somebody want to move the minutes? Councillor Freeman, Councillor Veith. All those in favor? That would be all of us. Thank you. No reports of committees. First up is delegations. The Waterloo Ghosts Midget Girls Softball Gold Team Bronze Medal winners. Under 18 Women's Softball Championships in Lloydminster, Alberta. And I think I'll turn over to Councillor Burke, or do we want to invite our guests up first? Or can you?
I'll take it first. It was actually almost 21 years ago this week that a group of us sat together and said we need to do something for girls to play ball in Waterloo and to give them a system where they could have a great time and learn some skills and take that whatever way they want. Maybe they want to play at a recreational level or a competitive level. And a year later, the organization won its first medal at the provincial championships in long enough that no one remembers. At that time, a man by the name of Garnet Rooney suggested maybe if we had all the same name for a team, it would be a good idea. And at that point, we made the decision to brand that organization as the Waterloo Ghosts. And over the last 20 years, they've become one of the most successful girls' ball organizations in the country, winning national medals for, I think, each of the last 3 years, if I'm right. And very, very few organizations can claim that. Many of these kids are not able to make the day because they are off furthering their education by playing ball, which is a pretty cool thing as well. The Waterloo Ghosts Midget Girls Gold Team, that's 18 and under, played at the National Championships held in early August, hoisted by the beautiful Lloydminster Amateur Softball Association and Softball Canada. The week-long championship won the Waterloo Ghosts the bronze medal. We would like to show our support to those medal winners and have certificates for each of the players and coaches. As I said, many of them can't attend today, but we do have 2 representatives. So we would like to call up player Anissa Zaharchuk and Kitchener City Councillor and proud parent, Dave Schneider, to come on up.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations. You actually have a stack of these to take off. We're going to find all your comrades and to do that, get that out to them or the next event or whatever wrap-up, season wrap-up we have. So definitely on behalf of our City Council and citizens of Waterloo, and actually, well, citizens, to congratulate you on this great achievement for your team, and I trust you enjoyed yourself on the night.
I did.
Yeah. Congratulations. Another full stack. Dave for taking on this. Excellent. Okay, yeah, come on over forward. Okay. Can I invite either you or Dave to say a few words? Both of you now to say a few words. About the team, when, what your next steps are? No? Dave?
Dave, you've never met a microphone you didn't like.
ready to go.
On behalf of the Ghost 2, we really thank you for the great facilities you have here in Waterloo. We were able to host the Ghost Revive their tournament this past summer, and the facilities, and especially your groundskeepers, did an amazing job keeping the grounds and the areas in great shape. So really want to thank you for giving us great places to play. Anything for you?
And that might be it.
I think that might be it. Thank you so much for your support.
Okay, congratulations. Okay, next we move on to staff reports. First up is Recreation and Facilities Service Fee Update 2017, prepared by Lita Campbell. Do we have questions from staff on that? Or staff? Questions from council for staff on that? Seeing none, somebody want to move it? Councillor Henry, Councillor Burke. All those in favor? That's approved unanimously. Next up, condominium conversions, parkland conveyance, report prepared by Joel Cotter. And are you saying, do you have anything to say, Joel, or just questions?
You did.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Before council this evening is the report on the condominium conversions and the parkland dedication. The city's current practice around parkland dedication exists where there has never been a conveyance, where there's development going on, or where redevelopment is occurring. And council does consider exemptions to the parkland conveyance requirements of the city on a case-by-case basis. Where there has never been a conveyance, parkland conveyance on a property, and a development application is advanced, the city has historically required a conveyance based on equity so that every property in the city contributes to the city's parkland. Through 2 condominium applications in 2014, council questioned the appropriateness of conveyances for condominium conversion and directed staff to do some research and analysis with respect to our parkland dedication policy, recognizing the unique nature of condominium conversions. Recently, we've received condominium application 17407, which is the next item on council's agenda this evening. That has been submitted, which prompted the report that's before council. The city's current parkland bylaw does not speak to condominium conversions. They are a unique type of development in that they relate to a change in tenure from rental to ownership, and typically there is no development or redevelopment. So in those instances, parkland from the city's perspective is only considered where historically there's never been a conveyance on the property. Staff did review legislation, internal documents, correspondence, as well as a number of other municipalities. The best practice review that we did undertake, there was no references to condominium conversions in any of the parkland documents that we could review. There was actually few references to condominiums in total. The exemptions that generally applied were around institutional uses, secondary units, buildings that were damaged through fire or act of God. Certain municipalities exempted downtown cores, or renovations that did not result in a new dwelling unit being created. So there's a density component to this discussion, as well as small additions to commercial and industrial buildings or for lands that are deemed to be undeveloped. And most bylaws, which is a requirement under the Planning Act, reference development and redevelopment with credits going to existing development. The Planning Act is somewhat complicated when it comes to parkland, and I'm not going to get into the details of that. When staff ultimately looked at this, we've reviewed it as a fairly simple, straightforward matter in terms of direction from council to staff. Under our 4 condominiums, Section 51 of the Planning Act applies, and essentially that says that it speaks to reasonable conditions being applied having regard to the nature of the development. So 4 condominium conversions, which are about tenure, having regard to the nature of development, if that's council's test, there is no development and there is no redevelopment that's being undertaken. So requiring conveyance, or requiring a parkland conveyance where there has never been a conveyance, historically, under Section 41, is permitted. However, it can reasonably argue that such a conveyance should be deferred until the site in the future is redeveloped or essentially is redeveloped. And council's made that determination on a number of recent condominium conversion applications, in particular those 2 condominium applications on Westcourt Place in 2014. We've organized the report with 2 options, which is option 1, the status quo, option 2, to provide that exemption, recognized through resolution of council. The Commissioner of Integrated Planning has authority under the Parkland bylaw to take direction from council. And planning staff have no objection if the deferral to condominium conversions is granted by council at their discretion. You've also received legal advice from the city solicitor on this matter under separate cover. We don't include legal advice within our staff reports, and we'd be happy to answer any of council's questions. But in the end, this is a unique form of development. It is typically just a change in ownership or change in tenure from rental to ownership. There is no development going on. So from staff's perspective, if council wants to continue its recent trend in providing a deferral to these matters for future development, then we have no objection to that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Joel. Questions from council. Did Councillor Durrell, did you have your hand up or not? Oh, Councillor Whaley. Okay. Okay, go ahead. Councillor Durrell, Councillor Whaley.
I can see why they could make that.
Okay, Councillor Whaley.
Joel,
Councillor
thanks
Durrell.
for the information. It's true that we are changing ownership, but aren't we also really changing use? These particular condominiums have been, I don't know, maybe 40 years old, and they were primarily initially designed for student housing. And as the student housing market has so rapidly changed over the last few years, now we see a conversion to another use. But doesn't that conversion also mean a different type of person living there, from predominantly students to another type of person who might have different parkland needs?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Whaley, I would characterize the use as still being a residential use. The Planning Act doesn't allow the municipality to distinguish based on relationship. So whether it's someone that owns the unit or rents the unit, the application and how we apply our rules should be the same. So I don't think there's a distinction there in terms of staff's review of this particular application. It may be that someone does own it and continues to rent that particular unit. It could be that someone owns it and resides there. I don't think, in my view, that necessarily has a bearing, nor would the Planning Act allow us to make a distinction based on that relationship.
Okay, next up, Councillor Durrell, please.
Just a really simple question. Why do we collect parkland?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Durrell. The purpose of the parkland conveyance process that the city has is to secure both physical land dedications, or in certain instances cash in lieu, to provide parkland for the residents of the city.
No, we have a delegation to hear, and we haven't heard from the ward council yet either. So, yes. Further questions from staff? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Joel. I'd like to invite our one delegate up, Mr. Craig Robinson.
Thank you. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. Chair has already identified me, so I'll move past that. I do agree with Mr. Cotter's last 2 comments, but I would like to perhaps expand on some of the prior comments. And I'm going to mix this in a little bit with our client's application as well as the policy itself. As Joel noted, or Mr. Cotter noted, 3 years ago, our client brought 2 similar conversions forward to council. And as a result of that those 2 applications, council waived the cash in lieu on both of them and asked that staff research and analyze without prejudice the policy. And my understanding is that today's presentation represents that analysis and research, and I have no issue with what was brought forward by way of facts. However, it hasn't been adopted by council yet, so I submit that we're really in the same situation we were 3 years ago, in that we have brought forward existing residential development of 30 to 40 years in age, and that there's been no change in anything since that time, and with respect request that the same result occur, which is, as Mr. Cotter put it, it's a deferral until there's actual development. The question of whether you can take park fees or park land on a conversion is really more than just a policy decision of a municipality. It is, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, it's a legal issue that relates back to the Planning Act, and not just the Planning Act, but the case law which has interpreted the Planning Act. And we have provided correspondence with a number of cases which address this issue, and it's lengthy and dull. But I can tell you that what it makes it clear is that a municipality is not entitled to take a parkland dedication or cash in lieu on every application that comes before it under either Section 41 of the Planning Act or, more importantly, in this case, under Section 51 of the Planning Act. The case or the legislation, as Mr. Cotter alluded to, it says that reasonable conditions may be imposed, and the case law has said very clearly that it is not reasonable to take parkland or cash in lieu if the application that is before council, if approved, will not lead to any increased need for parkland. The rationale, I think, is quite simple, that it's not automatic simply because an application has been made. It's applied because if the application is approved, there will be more people living in the community, there will be more need for parkland. That's why I don't think ever object to it on subdivisions, because we know darn well that you have an empty field, you're now going to put people in it, they're going to need parks. It's, I think, a no-brainer in those circumstances. But the law says that if your application is not going to give rise to any increased need for parks, then it's not permissible to take parkland on an application. And we go on at some length about the nuances of the Planning Act, which I won't repeat here. It's also, I think, perhaps fundamental and even simpler that even when you are entitled to take parkland or cash in lieu, which I submit in this case you're not, even if you were, you have to look to your parkland dedication bylaw. And in your case, the City of Waterloo, the bylaw is quite clear in that parkland or cash in lieu may only be taken if there's development or redevelopment. And I think Mr. Cotter and I would agree there is no development or redevelopment taking place in this instance. It's just a change in tenure. And so under the wording of your own bylaw, you're not entitled in this case to take parkland or cash in lieu. The report suggests that taking parkland from existing developments is fair if the city has the chance. I submit it's actually unfair, just to show the other side of the coin perhaps. This development, as with I think all existing developments, has been paying taxes for many years, in this case 40 years. There have been parks built within that time. The City of Waterloo, I think, makes sure that people have adequate parkland. So if it wasn't coming from park fees, it would have been coming from taxes, which this property has already contributed. So it's been paying taxes for a long time, and I suspect some of those monies have gone into parkland. So in summary, I request the city not take any parkland or cash in lieu with respect to this application, and I would support a conclusion to your policy that parkland be deferred on conversions where there's no change in anything except the tenure to a time that is developed or redevelopment, based on the fact we're exactly where we were 3 years ago. And with respect, I think the same result should follow as 3 years ago. The case law says the city's not entitled to take it because there's no change in the need for parks because of this application, and it's contrary to your bylaw. Those are my submissions. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Robson. And apologies to Councillor Durrell, where I did double check the map. I thought the other side of Westmount was already Ward 6, so it is Councillor Durrell's ward. First up is Councillor Whaley.
Well, thank you for your interesting interpretation. I'm interested, you talked about no change after 3 years, but let's take a look 40 years ago when the development was first put in. You said there should be parkland dedication for development or redevelopment. 40 years ago, did you pay parkland development fees then?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't think so, but there was no policy in place at that time like there is today.
Mr. Cotter?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Whaley, that's correct. I don't believe, or I'm not aware of any policy 40 years ago that would have required a parkland dedication.
Further questions of the delegate? Seeing none, thank you very much, Mr. Robson.
Thank you very much.
And looking around the horseshoe for further questions or motion. Councillor Durrell wants to move the motion.
Option 2.
With option 2, which is the deferral, seconded by Councillor Henry. Discussion, Councillor.
I'll just say simply that this, to me, is when we talk about parkland, it's about green space. Comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, nothing is changing in this building. The same amount of residents are there, the same amount of green space that was planned when the development was originally planned is there, and I see no reason for this to trigger that. As much as we love parkland money to better the green spaces around it, I don't think that it's something that should be put in a bylaw.
Okay, further comments from council? Councillor Henry?
Having seen this matter come forward on the other two-thirds of this site 3 years ago, council at that time, dealt with the application before us and asked staff to go back to take a broader look so that we could take an appropriate policy approach on all future applications that would come forward. That's what's before us now, so I thank staff for the review, and this is certainly our opportunity to, I think, recognize and acknowledge, as Councillor Durrell has said, where the case law stands, and that provides a quite clear result in this case. Much as every new dollar of parkland dedication fees that we acquire would benefit not just this applicant, but every future developer in terms of the needs that we acquire in the city. But again, the case law does not support us doing that. And while that's highly unfortunate, it is quite instructive in this case.
Councillor Freeman, please.
My only question was to staff to say, this isn't the first time this has come to us, but this is the first time that we've kind of had language that speaks to the Planning Act around the deferral until such time that a future development happens. Is there more that staff need on this, or can we anticipate this is going to be the protocol that you'll continue to bring it to us to go through these motions?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Freeman. I expect when Growth Management Division undertakes some of its work around public realm guidelines that we will do an update to the city's parkland bylaw. But for now, the existing bylaw allows the Commissioner of Integrated Planning and Public Works the authority and the discretion to apply the bylaw as directed by council. So I believe the resolution is sufficient to provide staff with direction on exempting condominium conversions on a move forward basis until we formally update the bylaw at an appropriate time.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? That would be all of us. Thank you. Thank you very much, Joel, for your team on that work too. Next up, condominium conversion application 30 CDM, whatever, Westmount Road North, prepared by, well, it's very long. Prepared by Danielle. I see Joel here. Is there any presentation or comment?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, as a result of council's decision a minute ago, we would recommend that condition 3N be struck, which is a requirement, the standard requirement for parkland dedication. So the remainder of the document is valid, but condition 3N should be struck.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a delegation. Did anybody have questions for staff before we hear the delegation? Councillor Whaley.
So, Joel, as we heard, these buildings are 40 years old, and for the most part over the last 40 years have been used for student housing. I don't think too many people would disagree with that. Now they're being proposed for a new use. With respect to the change of the use, does the new owner have to bring these units up to 2017 code? Or are they allowed to slide over that issue and have a 40-year-old home at the 40-year-old code sold as condominiums going forward?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Whaley, I believe there's a recommendation in one of the conditions that speaks to a technical building audit being completed by a qualified architect or engineer. And the purpose of that is to determine any deficiencies and complete any remedies that are required to bring it up to a safe condition. Not necessarily that would be to the current code, but to a safe condition, and that anybody that's purchasing a unit would understand where there are deficiencies with respect to the units.
So typically on a new development, you'd get a Tarion, piece of documentation saying that there's something standing behind that. We have to pass this not knowing what the shape of the building are. We don't have that research hasn't been conducted yet. So how do we guarantee for future buyers that these units are going to be, is it up to us to give that approval rating in place of Tarion? Who is it buyer beware, or is there some kind of guarantee that comes with these things saying they're 2017 safe, not 1967 safe?
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, Ms. Weeby, I think, is going to speak to the application. Maybe she can address some of the more fulsome components of this, or Mr. Robson as well. The region of water is ultimately the approval authority. The city is a commenting agency to the region. We're recommending, as I indicated, that a technical building audit be completed, again, to try and make sure that the property is in compliance with our zoning bylaws and our site plan bylaws that are in place, but also that the technical building elements are essentially safe for moving forward.
So my question is, why are we asking for that after the fact instead of before approval?
So we're recommending it as a condition of approval. So before registration of the condominium, these works have to be, the conditions have to be satisfied.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions of council, I will call up the delegate, Carol Weeby. Welcome, Carol.
Good afternoon. I have a, are you doing it? Good afternoon, Your Worship and members of council. I am here on behalf of the applicant, 2260700 Ontario Inc. And we are here to speak in support of the recommendations that are before you. And there's two recommendations. One is to approve the staff report, and the second recommendation is to support the conditions of draft approval. And with the one exception of condition 3N, which was just dealt with, we are in support of all of the conditions of draft approval. And there were a number of changes from the first two condominium conversions that took place in 2014. There's actually been some additional conditions, and these actually speak to some of the matters that Councillor Whaley spoke to. So there will be the requirement for both a technical building and site audit. And those audits will identify any deficiencies that need to be brought up to current code and bylaw practices. So that is a condition that must be satisfied prior to registration. So no deals can close until that audit is done. There was a change even in these conditions over the two previous condominium conversions. It said that the owner would provide that undertaking. Now it's a solicitor's undertaking. So it's added a little bit more strength behind the conditions as well. So all of the audit will identify any property standards, any code requirements that need to be rectified. That all has to be done prior to registration. And the other benefit of this conversion is that it provides a greater diversity in the housing mix, because there will be opportunities for home ownership. And I don't know if any of the councillors have been by that site, but you'll see that the prices of these units are ranging from $230,000 to an upper limit of $280,000. So while that may not meet government affordable housing criteria, it certainly is very affordable in today's marketplace. So it will provide opportunities for home ownership, and it also will provide continued rental units. Some of the units that have been purchased in the first two previous condominium conversions have been bought by investors, and those units are being continued to be renting out. So it's not complete depletion of the rental market, but some of these units are actually being owner occupied. So it is providing a little bit more diversity on this property than what has previously occurred. So we're improving the diversity. As I said, the units themselves are being brought up to current code standards. One of the other conditions is a reserve study will have to be done. So that reserve study will identify all of the ongoing maintenance and any repairs that need to be done to ensure that there are sufficient funds going forward to make any repairs to common elements and any of the assets of the condominium. So again, a number of safeguards are going to be put in place. And the other condition that's included in this is that there are some easements, or there are some telecommunications facilities along Westmount, so the necessary easements are going to be put in place where there weren't any. There's a walkway that traverses this condominium, and so an easement will be put in place to secure that walkway and easement in favor of the other two condominiums. So there's a lot of housekeeping matters that also get dealt with through this condominium application. So I think overall there's certainly a lot of benefits through this application, and we've gone through all of the conditions, and I said there was a number of additional conditions, some changing in the wording, but we have no concerns with all of those conditions, save and except the one dealing with the parkland. And it's my request that council accept the recommendations before you and forward the support to the region of Waterloo.
Thank you very much, Carol. Questions of the delegate? Councillor Whaley.
Well, you and I have been both keen observers, Carol, of the transitioning of student housing over the years, and now it seems to be transitioning again to more of a high-rise state and creating a state of flux for us all. And I'm certain this application is part of that change of direction. With respect to, you talked about reserve funds, and we know that in a brand new condominium build, the residents put a certain amount of money in a condo fee every month to cover not only the cost of maintenance for today, but far down the road. And owners will have a pretty good idea, or should at least ask the question, what their monthly condo fees are going to be.
That's correct.
In this case, the condo is already 40 years old, and so that it's likely one would assume that some of the maintenance issues would be closer in the horizon for some of the long-term stuff. And will the condo owners know in advance what their condo fees might be are expected to be based on that?
Yes,
because you have to assume they're going to be higher.
No, in the condominium declaration, all of that information will have to be provided. And the other important part to remember is that the technical building and site audit will identify any deficiencies that need to be addressed even prior to registration. So the owner of the property today will have to make a number of those improvements even before those units are sold to those future owners. So a lot of those issues will already have been addressed. And so the reserve fund will deal with the normal day-to-day maintenance and reserve funds for, major infrastructure, roofs, and replacement of windows. So that will just be going forward. Any deficiencies that are identified through that audit will be addressed up front prior to the units being sold.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Carol. So now we'll open up to council. Councillor Henry.
Between Councillor Durrell and I think we're happy to move the motion with the amendment suggested by Joel.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Henry, second by Councillor Durrell. Councillor Whaley, yes, please.
Merely a comment. We're at the front end of all these condo conversions, in my opinion, Mr. Cotter. We'll see more and more of these as the student housing, preferences change. And I hope that as a city, we're keeping our eye on some of the problems that result in these condo conversions and begin to get a real feel for, what these older buildings as they transition into a new use, some of the problems that they create for owners as well as for the city, so that we when we look at this stuff, we'll have a broad viewpoint on how they're impacting the city as a whole going forward.
Seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor? That'd be all of us. Thank you, and thank you all for coming out. Item D, the Gulf North lease renewal. We have a report in front of us that's prepared. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none. Moved by Councillor Veith, seconded by Councillor Henry. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Next up, 2415 University Avenue East Land Disposition Update, prepared by Ryan Mounsey. Welcome, Ryan. And is there any presentation or just for questions, Ryan? Just for questions? Yeah. Anything to question there from the team? Seeing none. Perhaps the ward councillor is interested in this one to do. Move it. Moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Henry. Any questions? Seeing none, last call. All those in favor? One more, Councillor Whaley. There we go. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, Ryan, for preparing that report. Next up, the Waterloo Service Centre upgrades. Summary of financial and functional project completion. Report prepared by Alan Gregor. Welcome, Alan. And Sunda. Is there any some comments, Alan?
Yes, through you, Mayor Jaworski. I just wanted to point out that the complexity of this project is probably one of the most complicated and diverse projects that I've been involved with since I've been with the city. Virtually every building on the site was impacted by the construction, and I think every staff member at the service center, as well as others from outside, were also impacted to a fairly lengthy process. It was challenging in that the entire service center had to remain fully operational throughout the whole entire course of the work. In the case of the salt building, they couldn't commence demolition of that building until the winter of 2016 was finished, and then they had to have the new one in place for this past winter. And owing to the complexity of the project, working with the architect and the contractor, we had to break out the construction contract into 3 separate phases with different substantial completion dates. In addition to that, it's notable that significant restoration and replacement work that was required or soon would have been required was not included in the original construction contract, but was completed as part of this contract. Significantly was the major restoration of the vehicle storage building. During construction, they found that some of the structural members, like steel girts, were in very poor shape and would have failed shortly after they had finished the work. So those were replaced, and at the same time we took the opportunity to replace the metal siding. So basically at the end of the day we have an entire new building with the exception of the metal roof out there. In addition to that, we did significant upgrades to the fire alarm system and the security system, which brought them up to current code standards. We were at the point with the fire alarm system where basically they couldn't source out any replacement parts. So I believe Sunda has some comments.
Thank you. In addition to that one, overall the project has accomplished more than the value that has been given under this budget. The total budget that has been given to us to finish the product is $13.7 million. And within that, we have maximized all the values that can go under it. And in addition, we were able to address some of the environmental, sensitive soils that has to be taken out. Even though we have allowed 9,000 tons under the current project, the total amount for the removal of environmentally sensitive soils were over $300,000. However, we managed to have at least 90,000 from the project budget. Now we have 237,000 that went above that one. So that's the one that we are here to sort of request for approval to fund this additional amount from our environmental sensitive reserve. And that is meant for this purpose. Thank you.
Excellent. you very much. Questions from council? Councilor Whaley up first.
Well, thank you for your presentation, and it is a beautiful building, and Al, when you say it's complicated, no one would know more than you for all the buildings you've built for the city. With respect to some of these costs, though, I wasn't sure, you talked about deficiencies, and typically a new build will have a deficiency list. And I'm surprised that some of these would not be covered under the typical deficiency list that you would negotiate with the builder.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski. Yes, we did have a final deficiency list, but those items weren't applicable to those types of deficiencies. These were above and beyond what was in the original contract.
Yes, I believe it was sort of more out of scope items or increased finding of salt contamination kind of thing. So, questions from council? Seeing none. Somebody want to move this? Councillor Henry, Councillor Veith. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And this morning I had an opportunity to have the school crossing guards are all in for their training, our 26 school crossing guards, to our new facility, and they all commented on how good it looks. It's good to be in a new facility. I won't tell you what they said about the old facility. So thank you. Next up, letter of credit policy and standard letter of credit format. I'm guessing we aren't going to have a presentation on this one. Somebody have questions on our letter of credit? Maybe the finance chair wants to move it, or moved by Councillor Henry, seconded by Councillor Freeman. Comment from Councillor Henry.
Brief comment. Actually, I had the opportunity to speak to some Credit Union Association folks at AMO earlier this month, and this was among their issues that they were hoping that councils could deal with. So I didn't have to say anything. These things are right before us right now. That was always very convenient to be able to see. We're certainly, as staff have indicated, a hotbed of credit union activity in Ontario and in the province. There's many headquartered right here, and this is an excellent way to support our local businesses and local economy and folks that want to do the same.
So the staff report has intercepted the future. Wonderful. Great to hear. Excellent. Seeing no further comments, all those in, we moved it, right? Councillor, we moved it? Yes? We have not.
I tried to.
We did, okay. All those in favor? That's all of us. Thank you. So exciting, I lost my track where it was. Next up, cemetery services bylaw amendment, prepared by Bryce, but I think, is anybody, who's covering? Thank you. And you have no presentation, but questions from council. Councillor Whaley?
Yeah, so this is with respect to the photography. It's been an interesting topic in the community. Lots of feedback from members of the community and the media about this photography. And so the recommendation says that the cemetery manager will, for reasons of maintaining decorum, privacy, or sanctity of the cemetery, have people stop taking pictures or videos. Have there been cases in the past where decorum, privacy, or sanctity has been violated and that the city has had to take action on?
Oh, we just have to move the microphone over and get it on.
Thank you. Through Mayor Jaworski, I believe this is the full intent is so that with social media becoming more and more prevalent, that it is to enable us to have action in case we need to.
So I have
my question was, in the past, has there been any violations to the sanctity or decorum of the cemetery in the past to make you come up with this?
Not that I'm aware of.
I did have the opportunity to speak with Mr. Kraus at length many times over the past month, and he did indicate that there are a couple of groups, particularly students who like to do filming, perhaps in our cemetery, who do come to us, they like out of their own volition. And that's, they come to us, we give them advice, we say where they can operate and things like that, but they're not obligated to, nor could we technically stop them. Another phenomenon that's come up is recently is the phenomenon of doing selfies with a casket in funeral homes, and funeral directors are struggling with that over the past few months of not being able to stop them. So there's phenomena that are happening that we just like to encapsulate, was my understanding from Mr. Krause. Go ahead, Mr.
So from your discussions, Mayor, I guess I'll ask you the question. I'm rather unusual that I do, but from your discussions with the cemetery manager, during these requests to use make videos and shoot whatever they're doing in the cemetery, was there any violations of decorum or decency that you are aware of?
We were able to, my understanding, I'll ask Mr. Dykstra to weigh in further, but my understanding is because they were so thoughtful and came to us and asked for advice, that we were able to advise them before anything possibly happened. Mr. Dykstra.
And through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor, historically no issues with this collaborative approach with all the different groups that we deal with, whether it's school groups, the genealogical society, members of the public. We've been able to address these issues. We want to be proactive in the future should there be an issue, and how we can address that and have the words in a bylaw to do that. That's where we're at right now, and we've consulted with the groups that have had comments to date, and we've addressed it and even shared the update wording with them as well.
Further questions? Councillor Veith, please.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski.
I just want to make sure everybody knows we do have 2 delegations here.
Okay. I mean, I get it, but I have a really hard time understanding the wording of this. Is there any way that, like for the general public, that this could be just a little more easier to understand? I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe.
Thank you, through Mayor Jaworski. This has been reviewed by the solicitor and by the BAO, and they have looked at other bylaws from other cemeteries, and it is consistent in the wording.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Burke, please.
When I see something this, I wonder who's making the decision on what's decorum and what isn't. One person's decorum is another person's humor in some cases. I'm deadly serious about that. Some people may want to shoot in a cemetery for whatever their reasons are because they're producing something, but who's ultimately making that decision, and does it come as a result of somebody complaining? Because I wonder if we put this in place for reasons because it sounds good but doesn't really achieve anything.
So I'll go to staff, or yeah. Staff or Councillor, or Mr. Dykstra. Mr. Dykstra could comment, whichever you choose, or
thank you,
or perhaps Mr. Ross, who seems a newfound interest.
Yes. Through you, Mr. Chair, it's worded in such a way that the manager has the discretion to determine, and he's the best positioned to make that determination. And our current manager certainly is a model, both a model employee and takes that side of his job very seriously. He's always been a bastion of empathy and dignity, and he's best placed to make those determinations. And part of this is to shoot the puck to where we're going to be. And the mayor is correct in that we're trying to head something off. A trend in our culture. So.
Now I had Councillor Freeman. Councillor Freeman, please. Oh, okay. Yeah, and I'll have comments afterwards too, but maybe we should get to the delegations. So first up, I have Allison Nelson. First up. Welcome, Allison. You'll have up to 10 minutes to present. And you can adjust the desk up and down. There's a little control there if you want to get it more comfortable for yourself.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor Jaworski, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Allison Nelson. I work at the Stone Center. I actually have an awful lot of customers who live in Waterloo. My employees live and work in this area. They live in the city of Waterloo. They are taxpayers. I used to be. I'm here today to address the photography issue. thanks to the record. This issue has become, people have become aware of it. However, what most people haven't realized is that there is not just an issue with the photography that we have to address. I agree that the photography issue is important, but I believe that the wording is still not right. At this point in time, if you read the wording, it specifically says that the manager may simply just say, no photography, sorry, end of sentence. It does not allow for people to simply go in without permission. So I still think there's additional work that needs to be done on that particular account. Some of my other concerns are the fact that when I went to inquire about the bylaw, I was told that I couldn't have one. And that is directly against the Cemeteries Act, the Cemetery and Funeral and Burial Services Act. Monument companies and the public are entitled to a copy of the bylaw to review prior to it being approved by the BAO. And this was not done. In fact, I was denied that right. So I have since written a letter to the BAO, which you have in front of you. And if you want, I can touch on some of those issues. Otherwise, I would expect that you should probably perhaps rescind the existing bylaw and have a closer, more in-depth look at this. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions for the delegate? Now, I might have questions of staff on that one. Thank you very much. I see no questions. Thank you very much. Questions of staff regarding the permission aspect. My understanding was we've actually reversed the onus. So prior to it, people had to ask permission. Now the onus is on the city to actually stop people who are violating the decorum rules, but no permission is required. So maybe staff could speak to the fact whether permission is required or not under this new wording. I'll go with.
Yes, to offer council that clarity that permission is not required. People can take the photography that they desire. If it contradicts the decorum or sanctity of the cemetery, that's when staff will engage under the manager's directions to deal with that.
Okay, thank you. Correct. You can. Question from Councillor Doyle was if it's status quo, essentially no permission required. Okay, thank you. Next up is Mr. Bob. Who's it? Mr. Bob Oberholzer. I was calling up. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you. It's been a few years since I've been here.
Well, you're welcome to come anytime. Join Glenn.
I'm pretty busy in my retirement. They tell me that I was an entrepreneur, but when I was in KCI in grade 12, my spelling couldn't handle that, but the principal wrote a letter to Ryerson that being an entrepreneur, I wouldn't need to spell things out correctly. And I was accepted as the first member of our family to go to Ryerson or university at all. I was the first member to be born in a hospital rather than the kitchen table, so I'm quite an upgrade. But let's get back to my family. My great-great-grandfather arrived here in 1822 in a covered wagon, and he was the first minister at Herb Street Mennonite Church from 1840 to 1870. And then his son was a minister at the Mennonite Church at King Street and Sterling. And then my grandfather, they were all farmers besides being ministers. This is the Mennonite, you have two jobs when you're a Mennonite minister, or pastor as they like to be called really. And anyways, my grandfather was moved down to a farm which I don't know what to exactly call it now, but it's down where the Pioneer Tower was. And that was his home farm. And my father, who at 16 and his brother at 18, went to Waterloo Township Council, at that time it was in that area, and asked permission, asked if the council would consider building a tower to see the first 4 Mennonite farms in the region. Wasn't called the region then, but whatever. And they approved it with these 2 teenagers in 20 minutes, and they built it in 2 months, the township did. Much better than this LRT performance. But I don't want to jump around here. I slipped off the farm business because my grandfather went through a thrash machine and had to give up the farm, and his 2 boys were 16 and 18, so they sold the farm down where the tower is still today. And my father, as a result of that, ended up working at J.M. Snyder's for 45 years, rising to advertising manager. And then Bob came along, that's me. And after I went to Ryerson, I worked for a couple companies, McBrien Luggage, Local, Swift. I was a representative for Swift Meats, which put all my father's hair gray overnight. And then I worked for Domtar Packaging, which was a big packaging company out of Quebec that owns the government down there, gave them Domtar half of the woodland available to make paper, so they've been quite competitive. Anyways, then I became an entrepreneur. But first, I owned Leisure Lodge. You people are far too young to know about Leisure Lodge, but it was a dance hall with no liquor served. 1,200 seats inside, 1,200 seats outside. It's down on the edge of 401 now, and it's all soccer fields. Because after a tragedy with a fire, I was not given permission to rebuild because of the was 20 feet away from the river, but it was built before things like that were considered when the original owner built it, I guess. And after that, I got into the RV business, owning Kitchener Trailer down on number 8 highway, motorhomes, trailers. And gas went up, and I said, I better get out of this business. It's not going to sell $100,000 motorhomes, which get 4 miles a gallon. So I went to Listowel and opened Listowel Honda. And that was another little mistake I made, because 3 weeks after I got the franchise, the Canadian manufacturers, GM, Ford, Chrysler, said that the Japanese cars are putting them out of business, so they should put a quota on the Japanese cars coming in. So as the newest, smallest dealer in Canada, I was not getting very much inventory. So I looked for something else to do, and there was a tragedy at the Heidelberg Hotel, and I purchased that, sold the Honda dealership, probably to an unsuspecting person who didn't know about the quota. And I operated the Heidelberg Hotel, and they used to call me Pigtail Bob because we used to sell a half a ton of pigtails a week with a little bit of sauerkraut and the odd beer. And then my son was with me, and his wife started having babies, and we were running a business 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we decided to sell that, and I went into commercial real estate because I had sold a half a dozen of my own businesses, and I became a major business broker in town here, and later expanded to having an office in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the United States, and Switzerland, and here selling commercial real estate, mostly hotels. Anyways, that's what brings me to my retirement, and this is our since 1822. There's our history till today. I think at least 25 of my direct descendants are buried in Hagee's Mennonite Cemetery, down just past Toyota, adjoining the Preston Cemetery. And at least 25 are buried in the cemetery on King Street in Sterling, down here in Kitchener. And I realize that this bylaw is only for this cemetery up here, but it just happens for the last 20 years I've owned and lived in a condo at 225 Harvard Place, overlooking the cemetery that we're discussing here with this bylaw. And I happen to go for a walk about an hour every day, and my walk takes me up to that cemetery, not necessarily in the cemetery every day, but in that area. And a lot of our people in our building, that lives in our condo building, have buried their folks there because the survivor can look out the window with field glasses and see their stone of their partner. So I met Allison a year ago, something like that, and found out that she had this great technology of putting a family story on a piece of stone. Unfortunately, I didn't. I don't know whether you can see it, but this is what's been put on my memorial stone at Hagee's, and which I would like to duplicate at the cemetery we're discussing the bylaw about. When I take a walk, I'll probably look at that more. I'll enter the cemetery more than I have in the past. The technology is just outstanding. It's as clear as this picture on the stone. Now, in talking to Allison, discussing this, I just had this Hagee memorial put up 2 months ago, and Allison informed me that with this new bylaw, there's no way that she would be able to duplicate this in the cemetery we're talking about. And knowing how politics works, I am sure that the compounding effect, if you approve this bylaw, very restrictive, will rebound in every cemetery in the region, and then I will be shut down, and this, my family history that I've been working on for the last 5 years, which covers 195 years in this region, will be all for naught, because a good portion of this book, these two books, is tombstones from our family over the last 195 years. So as somebody that's into history and following all this information that my father and my grandfather left me to put together, I feel very disillusioned about this bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Oberholzer, and for the great history. Now, I'm just wondering what part of the bylaw, because there was the original bylaw that we had and was published in July, and we're updating it such that anyone can take pictures without permission provided they aren't doing anything that spoils the decorum of a cemetery. So we've made that, we're going to make that change today. I think that satisfies you, and I don't think that impacts the stone. I'll look to staff for further. Is there a part that I'm missing?
Well, I'm not, Allison's in the business of selling stones. And she tells me there's a lot of things that will be restricted.
Okay, and you're talking despite, I know you mentioned your album of mementos of taking pictures. I just wanted to confirm for you and for all the members of Harvard Place who have their loved ones that this option that we're looking at will not restrict photography and you will not require permission, but is more to protect the loved ones that are interred there from other people.
And a stone like that will be legal?
I'm actually going to ask staff on that aspect of the question. That wasn't up for a change today. That was up for, the bylaw was brought forward in July.
Because Allison tells me that that wouldn't be legal according to the bylaw.
And that I would have to, I'm going to look to the staff to see if anybody has looked at that aspect of it.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Yes, that is permitted. So it would not change anything.
That has not changed?
Correct.
Yeah, so that should not be impacted by this bylaw at all.
Are you satisfied with that, Allison?
Well, it's our meeting, so well, if I think, does anybody have any questions of Mr. Oberholzer? Yeah, seeing none, I thank you very much and thank you for the detailed information on that. Now, I'm opening up to council for questions, but I know that I've been working on this a lot with Bryce over the past month and a half since issues were raised, and maybe I can just make some statements, and then maybe Mr. Dykstra, you can confirm them. That I did know that we did put this out to the Ontario Genealogical Society, which was originally upset until they found out and heard from Bryce and discussed. And this is based on the old version where you required permission. Because it was consistent with Mount Pleasant cemeteries. Now, Mount Pleasant Cemetery in Toronto is actually the largest in Toronto, and also has over 180,000 people, or 160,000 people interred there. And they actually put in a no photography, no video policy as well. So we're following in that footsteps. And subsequently, speaking to the Bereavement Association of Ontario, they were also satisfied with the July version of the bylaw, and will also be satisfied by this option that we have with us today. And so they're on standby because we have to do something about it, I believe, in the next few days, or today, actually. But it was through all the work of the citizens who said, you know what, we'd like to do it without permission, that we've reversed the bylaw, so it still gives us the power to take action if any of these selfies with the dead phenomenon starts coming into our cemeteries or anything like that, and take action, unlike funeral directors are unfortunately handcuffed today and can't. Is that a fair comment, Mr. Dykstra? Or?
Yes, to you, Mayor, that is correct.
Okay. So this is something I think really is helpful in terms of reversing the onus. So instead of putting the onus on every single citizen who wants to do photography of their tombstone, or to Councillor Whaley's point, has there been issues? No, there haven't. But it gives us the authority in the future so that we don't have to update our bylaw for another 5 or so years to take action if some new phenomenon occurs. And that was sort of the intent and meaning of this, and to make it open for everybody to take pictures of their loved ones. So questions from council before we do this? Questions, or somebody want to move what we have here today? Councillor Freeman. Okay, moved by Councillor Freeman. Could I get a seconder? Councillor Henry, comment? Yeah, comment from Councillor, Councillor Freeman. For Councillor Durrell, let's go with your question.
Sorry, I'm still curious. That moved really quickly, and I'm still trying to catch up here. So, did you?
She was going to move it with a comment.
Okay, good. Okay, so I still have a question before I'm ready to
go
vote.
Ahead.
Okay, so so anyone can walk into our cemetery and take a picture right now if we pass this new amendment.
Yes, that is correct.
So my question to you is, if someone was in our cemeteries and they were doing things that are not classy, aren't there actual laws, police laws, trespassing, anything along those lines that would cover this at all?
If it was after sundown, then there is a clause in the bylaw that would allow us to do something.
So I'll add to that through the Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Durrell. The bylaw speaks to those after-hours activities. We also have, we would engage the individuals to deal with the issue at hand, ask them in an educative manner about the issue that they're doing, try to have them take care of the matter on their own recourse. From there, we would look at the means that we have within our legislative control to address the matter, and trespass may be one of those items too if that's needed, and would work with our solicitors to address that at the appropriate time.
Yeah, I guess my point, maybe I need to be more clear, is to me this is it's a public space, and if somebody's doing unlawful things, then we have police that are supposed to take care of that. This is like an extra layer of...
This is what makes it unlawful today. Without that, it's not unlawful.
So if I don't pass this, then it's actually the stricter bylaw, right?
No. As a
Because
matter of fact,
as of July, we've made a very strict, there's a stricter bylaw. What's being brought forward is to say something is a little bit more lenient, but we're still involved. So there's no third option, which is, I think, as far as I'm concerned, this is a police issue if there's anything to it, and I don't think we should be involved.
No. Okay. Mr. Dykstra.
Just to offer council some comfort on this, it's bylaws are in place to add that extra engagement of us as a municipality to whether it's noise bylaws or other public nuisance bylaws, where a police or a legal legislation won't have full control. This enables us to act quicker, resolve the issue, and approach the person to deal with it without waiting for the police to come in terms of their priority sequence. So this enables us to act in due course when we see an issue. It helps us with the regulation that we're there on site, and it enables us to have in our toolbox the ability to work through this. So I'll offer that to council at this time.
I guess my concern is that there have never been problems. We haven't had a problem, so now we've made a bylaw. We've got feedback that it was too strict, so now we're rewriting it. It still sounds too strict to me, frankly, and so I have nothing to vote on here.
Okay. Thank you. I see Councillor. Well, it was Councillor Burke. Was yours a question or a comment? Question? Okay, we're going to continue questions. I'll come back to Councillor Freeman for comment on the motion.
It's just on the paper that Allison has provided. Thank you, by the way. It's helpful to have somebody who has a different perspective than this side of the grass. There's a question about a clause on removal, where the manager can remove anything if they find it to be contrary to the bylaw without notice to the family. Seems a little bit out of line. Why would we not at least... I realize that in some cases family could have been gone forever, and that maybe you can explain to me the way that this would work or why we'd need to do that.
Thank you. Through Mayor Jaworski. Yes, that's exactly the case. Is quite often we don't have information to contact the families. It may be old burial. There may be things that are on the grave that were not, there was not a contract that was entered into to actually have that placed on the grave. So that's what it gives the manager the opportunity to take care of things quicker.
But is this a new clause? Because to me, this clause is giving much more power. It's allowing you to remove anything. So is this a new or strengthened clause in some way?
So through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Burke, appears to be some question still with this, this noted item right here. Myself personally, I just received this the same item that you have before you, and if it suits council, like from our perspective, we want to get this bylaw right. We want to do it at the right time. If council, and I'm open to this, if we can take it back, answer these questions, and return to council. From our end, that's a feasible option if there's still some ambiguity, and I think with Mr. Krause's absence today, I would like to do that. If that suits council, I can take this back, take the information, have a discussion with those who have inquired with us, and make sure we're on solid ground. So I offer that to council at this time.
Can I just ask a question about timing? I think the Bereavement Association was expecting to enact this like Friday, September 1st. Can anybody speak to that, which is what we have on file with them?
Yep, I can speak to that. They are awaiting our response from today, and they're flexible to work with us on the requirements for approval as well. If we need to do some fine-tuning, they're open with the timelines on that from that regard.
Okay.
Thank you for that. I don't like that particular clause. I think that's far too restrictive, and I'm still not comfortable with this language here, which seems to allow people, and they may be fabulous people, but they get to decide what decorum is. And I'm comfortable with that to begin with. And then this allowing, I think we need to make an effort to get a hold of people. You don't have to go to the ends of the earth, but if you've made a reasonable effort, that's good. But to say that you can take away anything from anybody at any time, I think we need to rework that.
Okay, I see other hands up. Is it questions of staff or comments on the motion?
I want to get in a comment before we get into a motion on deferral where I won't be able to comment. So there hasn't been a motion of deferral yet, so I can make a comment before there is.
Okay, but we haven't heard from the person who may move the motion yet.
Yeah, but if the chair would allow a comment before deferral, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, this is a real summertime issue, isn't it? Put your feet up and talk about this in the summertime because we got nothing else to talk about. So let's drag it on for a couple hours. In July, we passed a bylaw. Community feedback had us take a look at it. We take a look at it, we water it down. But really, what we need to do is just move on. And there has been no breach of decorum. There has been no terrible behavior out there, and I would just like to not have any motion come forward that's different from what we have today. It's just a big summertime waste of time.
Okay. Councillor Freeman, you still want to speak to your motion?
I guess my thing is this letter has taken me aback because when this came to us in July, what I understood we were doing was approving new fees. And so I honestly thought that the majority of the clauses in there were the same as they've always been. And so I focused my attention on the fees. So then the comments around the photography took me aback. I wasn't anticipating to receive emails on that matter. I'm indifferent to this photography issue. I mean, I've traveled all over the world, gone to cemeteries. I've taken photos myself. I understand this notion of decorum. If this language solves the problem, I'm happy to move it. If it's the will of council to remove the clause altogether, so there's no comment whatsoever with regard to photography, I'm fine with that too. And I think I have no intentions of dealing with all of these other issues today because I didn't know they existed, and I'm not sure they represent a change in practice, and so I really am happy to do whatever's the will of council, and to advance this. I think getting rid of the photography thing was what I understood that we were doing today.
Councillor Durrell had her hand up before.
Well, I guess for me it's just a matter of obviously we're not experts on cemetery services, and we have a lot of questions, and it just seems the more we dig, there are additional questions. So I'd like to see a deferral to just have a few more things wrapped up.
So that motion to defer, second by Councillor Whaley. Could I get comments from staff? Oh, and Mr. Ross is keenly interested again. Welcome, Mr. Ross.
Thank you. And I've now had an opportunity to read Ms. Nelson's letter. The only comment, and I'm not speaking against the adjournment, but my only comment is we have worked with the Bereavement Authority on all these issues. Mr. Krause has it's been a consultative approach. And there is a struggle in the industry we've had with several companies with respect to font and size of stone, and these are issues that come up, so we do need to have a bylaw to govern that. We need to have certainty, and we know from previous matters the importance of certainty with respect to the ground layout of the cemetery and things like that. So I just wanted to get on the record. I don't like to leave hanging that, for example, Ms. Nelson says that she hasn't seen the price list, but it was attached to the report in July, and there has been notice in this matter. So I don't like to leave those things hanging per se, but again, subject to Mr. Dykstra's comments, I don't think a deferral is the end of the world with respect to this, but what are we going to accomplish with that, I guess, is another question. So thank you.
I think I'd like to hear more from council is if we do defer, since that's what's on the table, what is it that the council members here who are uncomfortable want to see staff produce that's different from today? Councillor Henry, Councillor Whaley.
Subject to council agreeing to the deferral, it would seem that the most prudent additional, perhaps, table that would assist council is a comparison of what was and what we approved in July / or would otherwise approve here to identify what changed. Going back to the report in July, there was a bullet that indicated that the bylaw was being updated to clarify certain practices. Does not suggest to me a significant revision has taken place to existing practices, but since I don't have the past bylaw, I don't know to what extent certain things that are being raised are changes or issues, and that format may aid council in dealing with any challenges it may feel are there, and provide a better vehicle for Bryce when he's returned to respond to any questions or concerns, so council can feel comfortable.
Okay, Councillor Whaley, please.
For me, I'd like a third option. One is approve what's already on the books, which we did in July. Option 2, accept this new photography wording, which is before us today. And option 3, do nothing.
By do nothing, no edits?
No photography overview, or nobody asking permission from anybody.
To delete the photography.
Delete the whole thing. Let's call the whole thing off.
Okay, so to Mr. Dykstra on behalf of Mr. Krause, who's probably sorry he's not here today, yes. What say you on this?
What say I on this? So we're at a point where I hear from Ms. Glenna Hoff, who's beside me, who's Bryce's assistant, that the majority of the previous bylaw has been maintained. There's some small tweaks for efficiency on this, so that's what I understand in consultation with her. So I hope that gives council a comfort. To us, we have, whether we come in September or today, and if council wants some clarity on the points that have been addressed to date, we can easily do that. There's no impact on our timing. I did speak with Mr. Krause if there were concerns with that. And also the piece that we've spoke with the Bereavement Authority of Ontario with the changes and where we're at, and they have seen no issues. The information we received today has been brought to the attention of the Bereavement Authority. No one in my administration has seen this as of yet. So they can be a final guide to assist with them in that regard and deal with any of these issues, and we can address them back as well. So saying all that, and what I would recommend, if council approves the items tonight or this afternoon as noted, the adjustment, we can work through them. The bylaw, the piece I look to the clerk, whether there's the bylaw can be approved at the next council meeting, subject to ratification of all these pieces and comfort again with council, then it gets approved as is. So thinking through this, we approve the change as noted, and we advise the Bereavement Authority they can respond to any of these external pieces, and the bylaw gets approved at next council meeting.
So just for better clarity, when you said if the motion's approved, were you referring to the deferral motion or the original motion?
The original motion.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just want to make sure, clarity for everybody, that we're talking about the original motion and continuing on with that is what a suggestion.
Correct.
Oh, the clerk, come on up.
So at this point, you do have a deferral motion on the floor, and
Absolutely.
so debate is around the reasons for deferral, and so there should be a vote whether or not to
absolutely,
defer.
absolutely.
And then as far as, just to clarify, there is the bylaw on the agenda tonight that is worded with the paragraph as proposed in the staff report.
Correct.
But if council opted to deal with this evening, we can address any of those changes that council would like in the bylaw.
Correct.
So it's your choice.
Thank you. Okay, further discussion on the motion of deferral as it stands.
We'll pull the referral off the table then.
Second, we'll pull it off.
The deferral. Okay. So we have the original motion moved by Councillor Freeman, seconded by Councillor Henry, with the wording as stated there, where it supports anybody doing photography without permission, but we reserve the right to stop them. A good example would be Facebook Live. If you go to an event today, everybody's Facebook Living the event. A year ago, they weren't. I was talking to Bryce about this. Today, if somebody is Facebook Living an internment, he can't stop them, even if the family wants them to. So this just gives him the opportunity to act on behalf of the family on an internment. Councillor Durrell.
So I have a lot of issues with that, and I can't believe that we're spending this much time on this. But anyway, you have no idea what's going on with families. There could be some other situation where that person is Facebook Living for someone else somewhere. We can't. Getting involved with this, I think we're digging into situations that we have no right to be involved in. It's not our business. So I think the way that I read this photography, I think it's the way it's worded. And so if you had something like, we welcome photography in our cemeteries, except when you're doing really crass and horrible things.
Well, I think that's essentially what it does say.
But that's not what this says. When I read this, it says that basically that I can be refused for taking pictures. The manager will, for reasons of decorum, and privacy and sanctity, and those are his ideas of what those things are, will refuse or can refuse me to take a picture. So,
again, the issue is more the fact that if the family who is interring someone specifically asks somebody to stop live streaming the internment, our cemetery manager can do nothing today. He cannot act on behalf of the family. Most of this is to act on behalf of the family or those who are interred at our facilities, to actually act on their behalf, to offer them the protection for privacy, decorum, and sanctity. And without this, they have no protection. Councillor Whaley.
Yeah. Mayor, every good horror movie has a scary cemetery scene. But in this case, I think we're chasing ghosts that don't really exist. And so I'm just recommending that we drop the wording that we have today, and we drop the wording that we had in the former bylaw, and just have no reference or information or permission giving with respect to photography or videoing, and just leave it silent.
Well, today, right now, we have a motion on the table that we could see what happens to it. Councillor Freeman, did you? Okay. So I think we're... Oh, last call.
So quite simply, as I said, I'm somewhat indifferent to this piece. I can imagine taking it. But I will say that I have come over the last few minutes to better understand the fact that the police have no role to play at the cemetery, so we can't call them. Unless this bylaw was in place, we have no tools by which to request any action to happen. I have had it happen in parts of my ward where we had to implement bylaw just so the police could deal with an issue. And so, you know what, if this is going to let people take pictures and protect the city against, this is our cemetery, it is our land, it is our park. We put up signs in bathrooms that say you can't take pictures in bathrooms. It's, in my mind's eye, it's in a similar fashion so that when something goes south, you can step in and say, we got to stop this. So I just say, call the question.
Okay, and that's what we're going to do. All those in favor? That's 1, 2, 3, 4. All those against? 1, 2, 3. Motion passes. Next up, tender award, RFT 1716, Central Promenade and Bridge construction, prepared by Mr. John Griffin. Welcome, John. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Do you have any comments before we move forward?
No comments.
Okay.
I guess I would say we're just want to get this through. We're at the end of or nearing the end of a construction season this year, 2017. So I want to use as much time as we can to build this project. And that's about it, I guess.
Excellent. Thank you for the wonderful project. Questions from councillors? Councillor Durrell?
Great. So we're going with the lowest bid. What do we get for that bid? Let's tee it up.
Through you, Mayor Jaworski, to Councillor Durrell. What do we get for this bid? So essentially this, the $2.578 million will get us the, what I'm calling sort of the minimum vision of the Waterloo Park Master Plan. Gets us the separated bicycle pathway, gets us the separated walkway on the right-hand side adjacent to the animal pens, gets us lighting, the new pedestrian bridge, and the boardwalk on the west side of the tracks as well.
So in your opinion, after we spend this money, will there be a significant difference in our Waterloo Park?
Through Mayor Jaworski to Councillor Durrell, I believe yes. It'll be a significant difference. Right now, we just have a sort of a 5-meter stone dust trail. It's looking a little bit, rough in the park. I think right now a little bit. So I mean, it would be nice to improve it. The LRT fence has gone up, which I think be nice to buffer that. The wonders of winter infrastructure will be going in place, and things like that. So I mean, it will be a significant change.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. We're gonna have to work on your sales pitch. It's gonna be a gorgeous, stunning promenade, separating with trees lining it. Anyway, all right, thanks.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I think when Councillor Durrell, Councillor Henry, and I were at we did the groundbreaking there. That was fantastic. The people walking by were just stunned by all the work that was going to happen in that area. So definitely a marked improvement. Moving it, Councillor Henry seconds it. No further discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Oh, sorry, Councillor Freeman, that was 4? Okay, 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and go go forth on that. Last up, Seagram Drive parking lot resurfacing, prepared by staff member Tim Anderson. I'm assuming he has no presentation. Would anybody like to ask Mr. Anderson some questions? Last call, he's getting interested. Councillor Durrell's moving it, Councillor Veith seconding it. All those in favor? That is that. Thank you. I guess we skip down to new business. Where's the bylaws on the next? New business. Seeing any new business from council members. Councillor Henry.
Just in terms of an update, council will remember that last year we certainly fielded a number of media requests as certain buildings were not ready for their occupancy date, as many people in our community had expected. We spent a lot of time clarifying the role of the city, which is to uphold the law and make sure that when we granted an occupancy permit, it was because you could occupy it, even though it was an unfinished building, and that was the extent of our role in managing those. But it did take a lot of time for people to get an understanding of where permits were, and they may or may not have been getting accurate information from their landlords or property owners about what the city had or had not done. So this fall, we've introduced a new tool, an occupancy tracker page on our website, so that members of the public who are interested can see what permits have been granted. Our general practice is that this will be updated every week on Monday, and when there are significant updates, but I understand from our CAO for these first 2 weeks that staff will endeavor to update it daily so that people can, in this most critical period, see what is being granted, and that is a beginning point perhaps for them to have conversations with their property manager about whether or not the dates they've been promised are accurate or not. While it's not our place to, nor do we have the knowledge to identify whether these things will be ready or not, that is the responsibility of the landlord. This is a new tool that we've created to help massively improve the amount of information in a timely and accurate fashion we can provide to people who are looking for it. And for people looking for a good link, waterloo.ca/students, go into the housing page, and the occupancy tracker is midway down. Otherwise, I'm reading off a very long website. So that's the easiest way to find it. So thanks to staff for the work on getting that done. The mayor and I certainly met with students many times of something we could do that they agreed would be very beneficial and that they are sharing already with their members.
Thank you. Any comments, new business? That the way we get our message out to citizens is through our local media and Glenn, normally, who attend regularly. And I'd like to offer congratulations on behalf of myself and all of us here for Samantha and her new role at the Toronto Star. You were very dedicated in your articles and took advantage of the experts to get a full understanding of even the most complicated development charge and accounting items. And I'd like to thank you for you getting your message out to the citizens on our behalf. So thank you. Questions, please go.
Yeah, I had some questions with regard to some of the cycling infrastructure that's been put into place. So the first one is with regard to Caroline Street, the extra wide pathway that's been made of concrete, which on the one side of the ion track. What I understand is that it's intended to be a multi-use pathway, and that it's not signed as such, it's not lined as such, and there really is no direction being given to cyclists. And I've watched cyclists come in. They're very vulnerable road users in that space, and we need to help them to get off the road there. And I've even seen cyclists right now driving down the center line of those tracks just because they're afraid of being in the other space. And so I'm really worried about that, and I'm hopeful that we can see that addressed really soon. I see Mr. Nevin.
Yeah. Who's acting commissioner? Mr. Nevin?
Yes, through you, Mayor Jaworski, I know that active transportation staff are aware of that issue and have told me they will be addressing it.
Okay. And my second question is with regard to the status of the multi-use trail on Lexington Road. My understanding is that the asphalt markings that are on Lexington Road are not what were in our design. So we resurfaced it, and then the asphalt markings went down. And I don't think they're correct, because the way that the road is supposed to function is with dedicated left turns into Lexington Court and into the two entrances on Davenport, so that there's a flow through of clear traffic in the one lane. And my understanding is the whole reason why we were doing that resurfacing was so that we could get the multi-use trail in over the bridge and get that done. And I've got multiple email correspondence that I've gone back and forth with staff on for this matter, saying that the MUT was to go in this year, and we've approved it. And I know that Councillor Whaley and I have made many of a comment of, please just get this done. We've been waiting for it for 4 years, 5 years. And I want to know when this is going to get done. And my understanding is it should have been done by now. So I don't expect an answer on that right now, but I am increasingly frustrated with that space. And we went and we put pavement markings down on Lexington. There's no bike lanes, which is contrary to our complete streets policy. And then we've got no multi-use trail. So I think we need to figure that one out. And then my other question is with regard to Waterloo Park. So we've had signage up that says we're going to close the primary transportation mode through the park starting September 1st, when we've got an onslaught of students that we want to come to our uptown. And we've just put signs that say this trail is going to be closed, and I think that right now is the time to get the signs up to say, here's how you get to uptown. Right now it just says it's going to be closed, figure it out by yourself, essentially. And so we're inviting students to uptown, and we need to get that right. And there's been so many challenges around rerouting active transportation users through Waterloo Park, and I don't want it to be with our project too.
So I'll look to Mr. Anderson, who's been taking notes, and since engineering is not here.
Thank you, Mayor Jaworski. Absolutely, Councillor Freeman will follow up on the status of Lexington Road pavement markings and follow up with council. Similarly with the promenade construction, yes, the detour routing information, I believe John had a plan for display, so we'll certainly expedite that and make sure it's up before Labor Day weekend.
Okay. Thank you. Further comments from council? If not, we have bylaws to enact. Is there anything we need to adjust here, Julie? No, we do not. No. We're good?
No, the bylaw, in particular the cemetery bylaw that's presented, reflects the wording that council approved just moments ago.
Excellent. Somebody want to move the bylaws? Councillor Veith, Councillor Burke. Any discussion? All those in favor? That's all of us. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Whaley, Councillor Freeman. All those in favor? That's all of us.